Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is the author of Wall Street Journal-Bestselling book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depend on it. He was a former international hostage negotiator for the FBI, and he also taught business negotiations in top business schools MBA program, such as USC, Georgetown, Harvard, Northwestern, and many others. He is also the CEO and founder of the Black Swan Group. His name is Chris Voss. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Yeah, my pleasure, Grace. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have to say I'm a huge fan of your book. I have not only learned a lot about negotiations, but also a lot of psychology behind the communications between humans.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy it. You like people.
Yeah, I love people. When you mentioned about there's three types of people, there's the accommodator, and there is an analyst, and then the last one was you. So
assertive,
yeah, assertive.
Right.
I'm definitely the accommodator. So when I read that part, I was just like, this is so resonating.
Very good. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I think might be good about the book is a little insight to yourself, right?
Yeah, totally. Speaking of the insight to yourself, you broke your leg before you joined the FBI, which led you to become a lead negotiator. You applied to be working in the front line. And then this lady from the office, she told you to go to volunteer at the suicide hotline. And 2 out of couple hundred people actually done so. So you're one of them, right? So you drop in a line, you jump in front of 5 people to eventually get the spot. That's a legendary story.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and the little things in life, I mean, to be a black swan, which is, somebody that makes a difference in everything, has little things that make the biggest impact. So one of the little things, asking advice from the right person, never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. There's an issue of, are you talking to the right person? They might love you. They might care about you, but they might not know what they're talking about. So I took the advice from the woman in charge of the negotiation team in New York. And so she's the right person, but it shocked me that so few people followed her advice. She said, volunteer on a suicide hotline. I did. And she was stunned that I actually listened, which is what's a little thing you could do to make all the difference in the world. If you get advice from the right person, do what they tell you to do.
Yeah, for sure. So before you got there, how did you grow up? I saw that you were born in Kansas, right? Was it Kansas?
Well, I was a police officer in Kansas City, Missouri, but I grew up in Iowa. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. And when I was in college, I felt like I wanted to be a cop before I went to college. The idea got in my head when I was about 16 years old. But, while I was there, my major was sociology for a while. But I realized that if I changed my mind, I needed a more flexible degree. And I guess maybe all along, I like the idea of flexibility, having a lot of options. Business degree, I thought, would give me more options in the event that I changed my mind. And I found out sort of point of reality is business principles underline every endeavor. So it was helped me in law enforcement to understand how business worked. And that was really the principal idea, was just to have flexibility. But it taught me principles I thought were applicable to everything.
Yeah, for sure. So you had a business degree at that point. Later on down the line, you met that lady who mentored you. You have been a great negotiator. You've built a super strong personal brand. You wrote best-selling book. You have your own coaching firm. You are overall a successful business person. Who is on your personal board of advisors when it comes to career development or navigating life?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that's really similar to sort of who are your mentors. And then they become really the people that you listen to who know what they're talking about. And like Amy, who was the woman in charge of the hostage negotiation team in New York City, I wasn't looking for a mentor. But when you take advice from the right person, they have a tendency to then watch out for you, which is what you want a mentor to do. So the unofficial mentors, the unofficial, board of advisors, these days, one of the ways that we built my company, my son and I built the company. I wouldn't be where I am without my son, Brandon. We're great partners. We got a great business relationship. We went to a guy to coach us on business structure, a guy named Jonathan Smith. He's on our board of advisors, so to speak. He coached us on a system called Entrepreneur Operating System, which is, I had no idea until this guy started coaching us on it. And, I got to tell you, even, I didn't think I needed coaches, personal board of advisors. Those are your coaches. When we first started the business, Brandon and I started this, and we thought we would just figure it out. And I remember I saw over and over again, the most successful business people had coaches. And I sort of scoffed at it at the time, but we have coaches. I mean, we got personal coaches, we got business coaches. You want to get better, you got to go to a coach. And, my company, the Black Swan Group, excuse me, I'm on the verge of sneezing. Forgive me.
Please sneeze.
We're business negotiation coaches. And I got a whole team of coaches. And each one of us coach people in business negotiations. We help you get better, which is what you want a coach to do. A coach doesn't get in the game for you. A coach gives you good advice because they've had success themselves in what you want to get good at. And so, it's just a good idea across the board.
For sure. I'm curious, how do you find out who is going to be a good coach? How do you identify Amy is a person you should be listening to? You've got your co-author, your son, and Jonathan Smith. They are helping you with the business. How do you find those people who can help you and recognize who you should listen to?
Well, there's two sayings that are pretty much very close to exactly the same thing. Never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places, or, don't take directions for somebody who hasn't been where you want to go. I mean, those are two pretty close things. And some people that don't know what they're talking about, just because they love you, doesn't matter. I'm sitting in a Lyft in LA a couple of years ago, Lyft driver. And I got to tell you something. I respect Lyft drivers and Uber drivers because they're small business people. They started a business and you're riding in their business. So this, African-American dude with this booming, beautiful, deep voice, a good dude, we strike up a conversation because he's an entrepreneur. I'm interested in him. And he says, my mom thinks I should do voiceover. Now, I know how hard that is. It's hard. Most of the things that look easy are really hard. Like Derek Gaunt, one of the coaches in my business, Derek wrote this book, Ego, Authority, of Failure. It's about leadership, tactical empathy for leadership. Derek decides he's going to read the Audible for his book. Now, they tell him in advance that 2 half days is probably going to do it. Now, Derek hasn't done voiceover. He's got a great voice himself and smart dude. I mean, very, very smart guy. But he's never done voiceover. Derek goes in there and it takes him 4 full days to read the book. Almost 8 times the amount of time that they told him it was going to do, to give you an indicator how hard it is to do voiceover. So I know this. I'm listening to this Lyft driver. He says, my mom says I should do voiceover. And I said, this is going to sound really harsh because your mother loves you. Your mother loves you. I said, is she a voiceover artist? Does she do voiceover herself? And he goes, no. And I go, again, your mother loves you. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's never done it. She loves you. She loves you. She wants the best for you. Go talk to somebody that does voiceover to get guidance. It's a good idea. And that's the way it is with many people in our lives. We have a good relationship with them. We have good friends. We have people that love us. Just because they matter to us doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. So go back to never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. Don't take direction from somebody who hasn't been where you want to go. They have to have demonstrated that they know what they're talking about. And just because they love you, just because they matter to you, doesn't mean that that's who you should listen to. So you asked me about Jonathan Smith. I run across him by sheer accident in Washington, D.C. We strike up a conversation. We then interact for a period of years and as business people, but he clearly has my best business interests at heart. He helps us out, helps Brandon and I out on several different occasions for free, for nothing, just because he's a good guy. And he keeps telling us about the system, and he keeps telling us of all the business people he's coaching with the system and how their business takes off. And we interact with him enough to know that we trust him and that he's getting results coaching businesses. So finally one day, Brandon and I look at each other and we go like, you know what? We're struggling a little bit here. Maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. His results with clients that look like us make sense. He's giving directions to where we want to go. He's been there. He's taken other people there. And we kick into gear with his coaching. It initially looks very expensive. Once we start getting results, it was some of the cheapest money we ever spent, which is like most new expenses. You compare it to your existing world and it looks expensive until you get the results and you have reason to believe they're going to give you the results. And then it's cheap money. And that's kind of how we ran across and became engaged with this guy, because he was getting results and we wanted results.
Yeah, for sure. What is one piece of advice that he gave you that shifted the way that you're thinking about your business?
Yeah, great question. And something I thought was a complete waste of time. Like the first exercise he had us go through is, what are your core values? And I was like, what do you mean, what are our core values? Be honest, work hard, figure it out. Don't be a liar, deliver. I mean, how obvious could that be? He's like, look, no, it's not that obvious. We're going to spend a lot of time and you probably redefine them several times over the course of the coming year. He said, but you'll find all of your business relationships and your personal relationships, they'll work out because your core values align, or if they don't work out, it'll be because your core values didn't align. And it's no good, it's no bad on anybody if their core values are different than yours. And so then we're thinking about, we go like, all right, so you got to be a team player. And he goes, cool, write that down. Now, you're never going to talk to a human being who's going to say they're not a team player.
Yeah. But
what we found out was critical was, do they want to join our team or do they want us to join their team? Are they a diva? Do they want nothing but support from us and not provide any support in return? So we've come to really recognize that the person who wants to support a team, it's a completely different mindset. And now we know what it looks like. And then we see the relationships that work out or the relationships that don't work out. It comes back to one of those core issues, which then I thought it was a complete waste of time. And now I realize it guides all of our thinking processes with people we do business with, people we hire, people that are in my life on a personal basis. Something that simple isn't quite that simple.
Wow, that's really interesting. I feel like the fundamental ways of thinking and knowing the core value is really guiding us through our daily decisions. You have a quite successful career, from being a cop to working for the FBI, best-selling author to a company CEO. Overall, very successful. What is one skill that really matters to you in terms of personal growth besides negotiations?
Well, I mean, the willingness to learn. But then how do you want to learn? I'm trying to think of the phrase. But it's something to the effect of, it's a famous Shell executive used to say, the ability to learn faster than your competition is the only sustainable competitive advantage. And again, who's not going to say they're unwilling to learn? But how do you want to learn? Only by experience? No, that's a really inefficient way to learn. You got to read, and you got to read to get better, and you got to read. You got to be willing to be smarter today than you were yesterday. What does that mean? Don't be embarrassed by your mistakes. Some people are horrified by their mistakes and they're unwilling to get smarter. I might be in a conversation where somebody said, well, that's not what you said last week. And my answer to that is, I'm willing to be smarter today than I was yesterday. A friend of mine, a guy that I think a lot of, Michael Mogill, runs an outfit called Crisp Video out of Atlanta. They do video advertising for attorneys, but they're so good at it, we hired them to do video advertising for us. And Michael likes to say, if you're not embarrassed at who you were a year ago, you haven't learned enough over the last year. It's placing a premium on learning regularly. If somebody says, the decision you make you made a year ago, would you make that decision again? If somebody says, of course I would. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that's a closed-minded human being. That means you didn't learn anything in a year. So, being willing to learn, being willing to make mistakes, and being willing to get better. Now, if you made the same mistake the 20th time, you're not trying to learn. So, yeah, you're going to get battered a little bit. You're going to make mistakes. But be willing to get better. Be willing to admit your mistakes.
Yeah, I totally agree. You have to learn from both the experience side as well as like reading. So speaking of learning itself, you transformed yourself multiple times, and the most legendary time would be
still am.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. One of the most legendary moves is like you become the FBI, right? Tell us more about how did you get into the profession of FBI? It's like a myth. I heard your conversation with the Wolf of Wall Street person. So he asked a lot of the FBI question, which I'm just curious, like, how did you get in the first place? Do you apply? Do they select 5 people and then message them to, like, I don't know, hide their identity, or like, how does it work?
Well, it was kind of 2 things. First of all, the stars line up, the universe, serendipity. At the point in time when I applied for the FBI, they were on the beginning of a 3-year hiring push. So I caught a break that I applied at the very beginning of that push, and it took about 10 months to get in. And there were people that were in my class that one guy waited 7 years to get in. Wow. Just because his timing was really bad. So, but the harder you work, the more often your timing lines up. Now, again, and this goes back to never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. Now, my application scores, especially from the oral interview, were insanely high. How does that happen? As it turns out, in trying to find out how to prepare, I got a referral to an experienced FBI agent who was in the Kansas City office, and I interviewed in Kansas City. I sit down with this guy. Now, they got him on the interview panel because he knows how to do the job, which is the case in most companies. If you get interviewed by a panel, there's going to be one person on that panel who's going to know how to do the job and is really going to be there to knock you out, knock you off the list, because their consideration is, are you going to listen? Are you coachable? Are you completely self-interested? Are you possibly a team player? At least one person on that panel is going to have great answers for you if you can get the answers out of them. Interviewing for a job is not necessarily what you have to say. It's a lot on what sort of information you could pick up from them. So this guy's in Kansas City. He's usually on the interview panels, experienced agent. I sit down and I talk to him, and he says, because I'm on the panels, I'm going to give you some insight, but I probably won't be on your panel if I tell you this stuff. So one of the things he says to me is, we're looking for well-rounded people. we're going to expect you to be up on the most recent news. He says, how much do you read the newspaper? How much do you keep up on the local news? And I'm like, I don't. Like, I'm a cop at that time. And, what the latest headline is not going to help me arrest a bank robber or car thief or a drug dealer. None of that is relevant to my task at hand. And I'm not paying attention to the news, because if I sit down and study, I'm going to study the list of stolen cars so that when one goes by me, I know it. Or I'm going to study the list of people who are wanted so I can go out and look for them. I'm going to study applicable to my day. And the headlines ain't applicable to my day. And so he tells me this, and he says, all right, so, we're going to expect you to be up on the latest news. So I go into the interview panel some months later, and lo and behold, this guy's sitting there. And the first question out of his mouth is, are you keeping up on the headlines? He's checking to see if I followed his advice. Very much the way Amy checked to see if I followed her advice. And he told me to do it. I did it. I've been up on the latest headlines. I knew the news. I said, yeah, I've been paying attention to this. I've been seeing this. I've been seeing that. So this is what an unofficial mentor does for you. My interview panel scores were embarrassingly high. I can guarantee you that if he'd have found out that I didn't follow his advice, he'd have rated me sub-zero. He'd have given me negative points. I never would have got into the FBI because I was willing to pay attention. And so how did I get in? I found somebody who knew what they were talking about. I asked them what I should do, and I did it.
Wow, that sounds like a great strategy. So how does that translate to today if I want to get a job at a big tech company? How should I implement this into my life? Essentially, I just identify who I want to become, try to talk to that person, apply to the job, and use the information they gave me to prepare and get in?
Well, there's two parts of that. So then, who do you find? Somebody that has that job, that kind of job, and ask them, what does it take to succeed? So in the interview panel, and I used to teach at Georgetown. I taught at USC. Brandon and I both did, and actually Derek Gong on my team, the guy who wrote this book over here. We had him come in and lecture at both Georgetown and USC also. So what do you do in the interview? Now, your guidance counselor office, they're all going to say, what are you looking for in a candidate? And then, you got a preset bunch of things to say. Now, the question I'm going to share with you is not the same question. I would always coach students that were in my class to say, what does it take to be successful here? And then actually listen to whatever answer you get. And one of the great descriptions on the interview panel from a student of mine, they said that one of the people in the panel who'd been completely silent the entire time leaned forward and said, no one ever asked us that before. Because it's a different question. It's not about selling yourself. It's about making yourself smarter and looking like a team player from the very beginning. So this guy leaned forward and was shocked that somebody wanted to know about them versus selling themselves with a canned list of questions and answers, rehearsed. I mean, they see this 50 times a day. They see it coming. And he gave this person a very detailed answer. Now, what does that mean for the future? What it means when that student of mine got hired, and they got hired because they asked a great question and then actually listened to the answer instead of saying like, well, I already do all that stuff. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because I do that already. Now, that ain't the response. That is not the response they're looking for. They're looking for you to show that you listened and you understood. Now, you get that job. That person who gave you that advice is going to be very quietly watching you to see if you implement the advice. very much like Amy watched me to see if I implemented the advice. And when I did, then anytime she perceived me needing help or needed someone to run interference for me, I didn't have to ask because she already had a vested outcome in my success. I was implementing her strategies. Naturally, she wants to see me be successful, but she's going to do it quietly, and she's not going to make a big deal out of it. That's what happens when you ask that question in a job interview. It increases your chances of getting the job. But then once you come on board, you better show that you paid attention, because that same person who's going to run interference for you is either going to run interference for you or is going to say, you know what, I gave Chris advice and he didn't listen. He's uncoachable and he's not a team player, and I'm not going to help him.
I'm curious, does negotiation strategy only works when you are 100% qualified for a certain job? For example, your student maybe already have the credentials for the job. If I don't have the core credentials they're looking for, can I still negotiate? Let's say if I need a 700 GMAT score to go into a top business school, without meeting the bar, is there any way to negotiate?
Oh, well, I mean, we're talking about a couple of different things here.
Right, sorry.
But let's talk about applying. Let's talk about applying for the job first, because the job description is like a general mismatch. Whatever they put out is not going to match exactly what they're looking for most of the time. The job description is probably, they say that a giraffe is a horse designed by committee. So the job description might be a giraffe when they're looking for a horse. So part of that is if you're in the interview, you don't know what about you matches their highest priority. Now, you know that there's overlap. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the interview. But you don't know what the order of the overlap is. Now, if you start pitching the thing that's last on their list, but first on yours, you're now wasting everybody's time. So what does it take to be successful here? And then go dead silent and wait for an answer is also going to give you a clear picture of their priorities and might save you from spending 20 minutes of a 25-minute interview talking about stuff that they care about the least. The order of priority based on the job description, based on a job posting, is a suggestion. It correlates moderately with what their priorities actually are. You want to get into the interview and gather some information, find out where your competitive advantages are, and you're only going to find out for sure in the interview.
Totally. I do see that. I agree with the priority part. Let's say if their top 3 priorities are my weakness, do I just quit or do I try my best to negotiate my way in? How would you navigate that?
Well, then also, I mean, let's talk about, you're going to be a black swan.
Right,
you want to be a black swan. The two things that everybody's looking for is, are you coachable and can you put the team ahead of yourself? And even if you don't know how to put the team ahead of yourself, you could learn that if you're coachable. There's uncoachable people with phenomenal resumes are abundant. Truly coachable people, that's really the critical issue. How coachable are you? I had an underwhelming resume when I joined the FBI. It was so underwhelming, as a matter of fact, in my training class, new agent training, one of my counselors literally said to me, because the first 5 tests at Quantico, I aced all 5. I mean, I went in there and I worked my tail off. I had a very specific objective in mind. Actually, I wanted to ace all the tests, but I wanted to particularly outscore all the lawyers. I knew we were going to take legal tests, but I aced the first 5 tests, and my counselor said to me, like, I'm shocked because your resume is underwhelming. She literally said my resume was unremarkable, but I was coachable. If you're coachable, which is what people really want to know, because there's a learning curve everywhere. No matter how high your IQ is, no matter how great your resume is, your resume correlates loosely with whether or not you're going to be a good employee. If the resume correlated precisely with great employees, then no one would ever get fired. It would never be a bad hire. So show that you're coachable. And they want people who are coachable. Everybody wants people who are coachable.
Yeah, for sure. I think being coachable means really listening to the instructions, being able to following up with all the actions. You mentioned you were really trying to outsmart the lawyers. You have a great test score. What does it take to succeed at the FBI? And how do you gain the skills you need as fast as possible to be more competitive than your peers?
Yeah, well, I thought it was a combination of outworking people. I worked very hard. I like new ideas. I like to be innovative. I like creativity. And I was drawn to the other people that wanted to work hard and have fun. I mean, we joked around a lot at work, and I was really drawn to the people that got results. And it was the people that had soft skills, people that were creative, that put in lots of hours, but they did it with people that they enjoyed being around. I mean, every step of my career, whoever I worked with, I mean, we lived it, we breathed it. I mean, we put in tons of hours. And if we took a break, like, at the time when I was in New York, it was pretty typical on Friday afternoon. Let's go get a beer and a burger for lunch. And, we're just kind of chill for the rest of the afternoon because we put in a hard week. And then, then probably after, we've relaxed over the afternoon, people turn around and go home. Like the guys I worked with, we'd go for a beer and a burger and go back to the office. We'd turn around and go right back to work. And we never wanted anybody to outwork us. And we laughed a lot. I mean, we did silly things. We told a lot of jokes. We had a lot of humor. And in point of fact, you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So if you have fun at work, you're probably going to get more done. And you're going to figure things out faster. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that, we like to joke around and work. So I think that had a big impact on continually getting better. And, we weren't worried about being told that we were wrong. And we were often, when you're ahead of the curve, you're going to be told you're wrong. Because you're out in front of everybody else. You're in territory that people haven't gotten into yet, and a lot of people are going to tell you you're wrong. And we were happy to be like, all right, fine, you think we're wrong, we don't.
So I love your book. I hear so many great tips on negotiations. Let's say you and I are starting a startup. We're raising money from the VCs. How could we negotiate our funding? What are some tactics or tips?
Well, the book project is very similar to if you got a startup company. I mean, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a team. The book project was a result of a collaboration between 3 people. Myself, Tal Raz, and my son, Brandon. I mean, Brandon is the uncredited co-author of the book. I cite that in the acknowledgments of the book. But it was a team effort where we were aligned in the right direction. Now, if you're starting a company, you're people that want to invest in you, people want to work with you. They want to know that you're team-oriented. And so you're going to want to ask questions from your investors or the people that are getting involved. You got to ask good questions and show that you're listening. How do you want to solve this? How do you want to move forward? What do you think the biggest challenges are here? Where you're actually listening to the answers. Because people that invest in companies, as a general rule, a great founder may have gotten the company started, but if they're not coachable, and this is coachability thing that I was talking about earlier, if they're not coachable, as a company grows and evolves, the founder's not going to be growing and evolving with the company. The CEO's role is going to change with every evolution of the company, from being more or less involved. Like, principally, one of my biggest roles here in a Black Swan Group is to be hands off and let my coaches do the coaching. I got a whole team of phenomenal business negotiation coaches. I mean, these guys are superstars. And my job is to find other coaches. You know, I'm at the point now where I'm less operational and I'm much more recruiting. Because I got a Derek Gong, I got a Brandon Voss, I got a Troy Smith, I got a Sandy Hine. I mean, I got some star coaches on my team, and I got to get out of their way because each one of those has a different skill set. Like, no matter where you are in your business journey, one of these guys is going to be the right person for you. One of my black swans is going to help you elevate the level of your game. You're going to be attracted to us because you might have heard me on a podcast. You might have seen my name on the book. But my stars are the people that are on my team. And my role now, having been the founder, instead of doing everything, is to get out of these people's way because they are so good at negotiation coaching.
In terms of the tactics, what are some actions you would take to ask for money? In your book, I believe you mentioned about the sales negotiation situation. You would first think of a number you would like to be paid ideally, and then you increase a certain percentage to start with a higher number, asking for more money than you needed. In terms of raising funding, how would you negotiate? If we're raising $2 million, what would you say?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, really, since the book has come out, I mean, we got a great chapter on bargaining in the book. I mean, we got a great bargaining model that works every time. Bargaining tends to be a zero-sum game, and negotiation is a positive-sum game. You know, we focus much more on the relationship, Black Swan method. So, you know, really, to be a Black Swan, to understand a Black Swan method, we don't anchor high, you know, with numbers. I mean, I more want to dial in, if I'm going to coach you, if one of my guys is going to coach you, one of my guys, gals, we're going to have you dial in on the sweet spot price for the other side. And we're not going to want you to go higher or lower than that. What we're going to want you to do is understand the terms that surround that price that make it a great deal. So you want $2 million from an investor. You know, what makes that $2 million great money for you and for them? You're not going to find that out by asking for $6 million and being willing to settle for $2. You know, that's a waste of mental energy. You want to get a feel for what's a good price for the other side. And when you've got a good price for the other side, they're going to be much more open to talking with you about terms. You know, the price doesn't make a deal. The price can break a deal. But the surrounding terms are what make a deal. So if you're starting a business and you've got a VC venture capitalist that you want to get the money from, you know, how much help are they going to be after they invest in you? Are they going to, is their Rolodex open to you? You know, that's what you want a VC for. You want their support after they make the investment. The more commitment to non-price terms you have from them, the more support you're going to get. You know, what does this look like going forward? How do we make this successful as a collaboration? So you really got to get off the price term. Other than you got to hit the sweet spot for the other side so that they're going to be more likely to talk with you about everything that's going to make that a great deal.
For sure. I agree that there are a lot more terms than simply the money side of things. I like the example about you ask someone to put your face on the cover of the magazine instead of making them paying the full price, which I thought was a genius move. There are a lot of great strategies from your masterclass and book. What is the best way that we could implement your strategies into our daily life? For example, if I'm buying something or meeting someone for a business meeting, I can't really take out your book and read a dialogue. What is the realistic way to implement the strategies into our daily conversations?
Yeah, a really innocent, innocuous tool is what we call a label. And, small stakes practice for high stakes results. So a label that could work in nearly any conversation, no matter what, seems like you get something in mind. Like, let's go get a coffee at Starbucks. Seems like you got something in mind. Let's watch Netflix. Seems like you got something in mind. I hate it when you do X. Seems like you got something in mind. That's great practice. That's a label. It's actually designed very specifically word for word. Each and every word in that label has a specific design to impact the brain in a very specific way. So we use a concept, again, my coaches, my team, the Black Swan Group, the Black Swan Method, is a concept that we're teaching people now called youre. And it's a martial arts concept, because a lot of this has been compared to Zen or Aikido or Judo, whichever kind of term you want. But youre, beginning, intermediate, expert. Shu is beginner. In beginner phase, do exactly what we tell you to do, word for word. If I say the phrase, seems like you got something in mind. I want you to say it word for word in every conversation, at every opportunity. Now do it exactly like that, word for word. So you've done it enough times. How many times? Probably about 63 to 67 times. And if you do that 3 to 4 times a day, then you find somewhere between 10 and 21 days later, you're really good at it. And what's the anecdotal evidence? About 21 days to learn a new skill, to have your beginner time frame built in. Now, how is the intermediate time frame? We've done it enough times that you begin to freelance a little bit, but stay within the structure. And you're going to go from seems like you have something in mind to you've got something you're thinking about. Slightly different words. Seems like there's someplace you want this to go. Slightly different words. But you can only get there by going through shu to get to the intermediate phase. At the intermediate level, if you've been practicing your skills, you're probably about ready for some serious training from the Black Swan Group. Now, we take on beginners also, but I'm telling you at intermediate level, if you've got the practice in, you are ready for us to really accelerate your outcomes. Now, the third level, that's expert level stuff. And once you've worked your way through, and these are all perishable skills, this is not riding a bike. And this is why the top business people continue to have business coaches. Tony Robbins is coaching billionaires. And they're better business people than he is. But they know they need coaches. Because they're at the expert level. They know that that's a perishable skill. And they're making up their own rules at that point in time. And they're still getting coached because they know they need the occasional touch from a coach. Not the constant touch, but the occasional touch. And they're beginning to make up their own rules. And that when you get to in any skill, negotiation, Aikido, it doesn't matter. you're in flow. I mean, it feels great. Life is more fun and more enjoyable, and it's worth the journey. So start with, seems like you have something in mind, and do it enough times that you begin to really change it slightly and explore it and have even more fun with it.
Totally. Speaking of your company, the Black Swan Group, how do you train your own coaches? How do they train other people? And how do you set KPIs for yourself as a CEO?
Well, our coaches are one or two people. They're hostage negotiators that we found on the outside that just have a tremendous amount of ability and have got the emotional intelligence because they've been hostage negotiators. Mm-hmm. And we're growing some people internally. Mm-hmm. My son, Brandon, he coached when he was 26, which is 10 years ago almost. Mm-hmm. He coached a $35 million difference in a merger deal. I mean, he's been, but we grew him because he's been implementing negotiation strategies since he was 3 years old. He could make complete mm-hmm. sentences because his dad's a hostage negotiator and he's coachable, mm-hmm. and he picked it up on his own. And we've got other people from the outside that, we've met them and recognized their talent mm-hmm. in hostage negotiation, which is just applied emotional intelligence. And they had the skills, and we brought them in and we translated their skills from hostage to business negotiation. Then we're adding in on top of it. And we got a whole journey that they go through once they come in to understand how to recognize the acumen that they already have and apply it to business. Mm. And we bring them along as fast as they will allow us. And everybody learns at a different pace. Now when we bring on clients, sometimes people want to come to us and be trained, and, we give it to them in incremental steps. Sandy Hine teaches our basic course, the N9, the 9 negotiation skills, a 90-minute session to get you grounded in those skills. Sandy also teaches stuff just for women. As a female negotiator, she could say, like, look, when you use the late night FM DJ voice as a woman, just be aware that some men will read that as a seductive voice. And here's how you deal with that. Mm-hmm. Now, as a man, I use the late night FM DJ voice. And if somebody thought it was seductive, I would like that. I would be flattered. Like, oh, all right, I'm trotting that baby out there. But because of different pressures on women in the business world, they don't want to get caught off guard by that. They don't want to say, well, I use a late night FM DJ voice. The next thing I know, the guy was putting his hand on my leg. I don't need that. So like, all right, so because men misconstrue this occasionally, here's what you're going to be up against occasionally. And Sandy can help lay some of that stuff out. So we get coaches who will meet you where you are. Now, you're in the middle of the house is on fire in the negotiation, so to speak. Derek got called one time on an insurance settlement negotiation where in 2 weeks, the insurance company wasn't going to have to pay anything. Statute of limitations was going to run. And not only did they have 2 weeks left, but it was December, which means holidays. Like you could run that clock out easily. Derek coached the woman up. She was coachable. Instead of getting zero, she got a $25,000 settlement. The entire negotiation took place in the last 2 weeks before Christmas. So that, for her, the house was on fire. And Derek coached her and settled it. So we'll meet you where you are. I got a whole team of coaches. We'll meet you where you are.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us more about the course or the business?
Yeah. All right. So, and the website is blackswanltd.com, BlackSwanLtd.com. Now, we've got most of the stuff right now because of the pandemic is online. We're getting ready to go back into person very soon. As a matter of fact, we're planning the in-person stuff now for the fall, late fall. But the real issue is not, do we have stuff online, is do we have stuff that'll fit you where you are? Like we've got, I think it's a 10-week negotiation course that Derek teaches and Sandy teaches in depth. You talk about really giving you a lot of solid training and having you apply it. We're going to take you a long way in a relatively short period of time. Maybe you need the 90-minute session on the 9 negotiation skills just to get an introduction, just to get your feet wet, just to get your momentum started. I mean, that costs less. It's a 90-minute session. I think it's $119. I know it's a lot, but Derek's more in-depth class is $2,500, and that's a lot too. We've got a lot of free stuff on the website. Like a lot of people get a long way with just the book and the newsletter. It comes out Tuesday mornings. Newsletter's free. More importantly, it's actionable. Like if it's free, it doesn't matter if you can't do anything with it. The newsletter and the book will help bring you enough successes that your success momentum starts to get built where your return on investment is going to make the investment in the other courses worthwhile. We got a lot of free stuff. If you're just beginning, take the free stuff. Get your free stuff, get your foundation built so that any investment you make in yourself, the return on your investment is more than worth it.
What is the hardest part to be taught about negotiations besides implementing the strategy from the book and coaching?
The biggest sticking point for most people seems to be letting the other side go first, hearing the other side out first. It's contrary to a lot of advice that people give. A lot of like the bad advice over high anchoring means you got to go first. Or the bad advice over your elevator pitch means you got to go first. Or your value proposition means you got to go first. That is a guarantee of mediocre results. Now you can go first and you are sentenced to mediocrity. You're going to do as well as everybody around you does. There's nothing about your results that are going to distinguish themselves. You'll get the occasional big victory. They tend to be about 3, 4, 5 years apart. Our clients get big victories every month, not 5 years apart, 5 days apart, no more than 5 weeks apart, not years. So they're rolling up the victories on a consistent basis, and they're not making enemies. And a lot of it flows from being a little counterintuitive in really letting the other side go first.
After you let them go first, at what point do you sell yourself to them? If they're looking for a certain characteristics, when do you start telling them you have those characteristics to make them think this is a great deal?
Yeah, you want to, there's a difference between guided discovery and pointed discovery. I mean, you want to guide them till you have this stuff. If you're going to throw something out, you got to throw it out with actually a no-oriented question. Is it ridiculous for me to share a couple of ideas with you? As soon as you start sharing information, you have to treat people as if they have ADHD, attention deficit. Now, most people have 50 things on their mind, so effectively they got attention deficit. You cannot launch into a long value proposition speech. You probably need to throw 1 or 2 things out and check to see if they've landed. Because if you get 10 things you want to show out and you've lost them after number 2, what was that line from the movie? You had me at hello. You lost them at hello. You got to be highly conscious in the moment as to whether or not anything you're saying is landing. Otherwise, you're wasting everybody's time.
Yeah, totally. We're at the end of the conversation today. I have a 1-minute fire round for you.
Let's go for it.
Awesome. First of all, what's your favorite book?
Wow. Besides,
Is that your book?
No,
I love your book.
I got a lot of books that I like. I got authors that I like. I like Stephen Kotler's stuff. The Rise of Superman. I like Daniel Coyle's stuff. He's got a couple of books. One of them is The Talent Code, and the other is The Culture Code. I'm reading a lot of stuff around our things. So I like Stephen Kotler as a writer. I like Daniel Coyle.
Awesome.
On their business writings. I think Coyle's wrote some stuff about Lance Armstrong. I happen to be a fan of Lance Armstrong's, and I think Coyle was harsh on him in what he wrote.
Well, check it out. So who made the biggest impact in your career?
Wow. Different people at different times. Jim Camp wrote a business negotiation book that came out about 2002 called Start with No. Every negotiator has to come to grips with what yes and no actually mean. And Camp's book, Start with No, was where I really came to grips, because I used to think no was failure. I used to think yes was success and no was failure. And he really helped me cross that turning point with that book, Start with No.
That was a great book. And then there's like a Getting to Yes book.
Getting to Yes is Roger Fisher's book. Yeah. It's intellectually flawless. People are not intellectually flawless.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Wow. My father, who's deceased, because I figure when you get to the other side, you look back down here and you go like, yeah, there was some stuff that I thought was important that I was wrong, and I would say, hey, Dad, how would you rethink things now? Some of my answers, Jesus, because I believe in each religion has some of it right. So if I was having dinner with Jesus, I'd be like, what do you think of this Muhammad guy? What do you think of that guy? Do you guys hang out together? Do you agree with each other? You're like, what's going on with that dude? I'd ask questions like that. So off the top of my head, I'd have those two people. Yeah.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Wow, when I'm not working.
Yeah.
I love what I do so much. You might find me in a good steakhouse at the bar, having a steak, sipping on a bourbon, trying to strike up conversations with interesting people.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What's your favorite steakhouse?
It used to be, I used to go when I was in D.C., I used to go to the Capitol Grill in Washington, D.C. at 6th and Penn. The place has evolved a little bit, but it's geographically, it's at a really interesting location. You get a lot of business people in there. You get a lot of politicians in there. You never really know for sure who you're going to run into in that place. And so it's a great location to attract interesting people.
Yeah, totally. I'll totally check it out. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the show today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me on.
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.